Hi, this is Pat Cullenberg, Youth Division President of Missouri Hockey, and you're listening to the Rick Fowler Show.
All right, our first guest on the Rick Fowler Show is Mr. John Carney. We're going to go to the phone line here in a second. John is your noon to 3 guy on the Big 550 AM KTRS. I've been friends with John for a number of years. I've had a long-standing gig to where I would call in at the radio station or text in as John Doe from the airport. And so we're going to have John on here. Just 1 second. Let me turn him on, and we should be there. All right, you are on the air with John Carney. This is the Rick Fowler Show. John, how are you today?
Very well. How's it going?
Oh, it's going tremendous. Thanks for joining us.
Interesting to be at the other end of this.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Is it a little uncomfortable, or is this normal for you?
You know, I liken it to sitting at a restaurant when all the waiters come over and sing happy birthday.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's very nice, but it feels very strange.
Kind of an odd thing. For the three people who don't know John, John Carney has the noon to 3 p.m. slot on the Big 550 KTRS. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's absolutely correct.
Right. I initially started my John Doe from the airport routine with calling and texting on the Martin Kilcoyne show, but it eventually seeped over onto a few of your shows.
Yeah, and probably a good thing, too. I mean, I think you've really picked the right checkout line.
But what a cool thing to eventually be able to see you at the airport and to say to you, hey, pal, by the way, I am the John Doe from the airport.
And you're the first person I know to pat down my wife, and I was totally okay with it.
Ah, he's telling stories. We have to pat down the same gender. The gag for a little bit even included me calling in to tell you what color of sweatpants that Martin was wearing when he flew out that day.
He's got the wardrobe on Elm Street, doesn't he?
Oh yeah. Have we got him figured out or what? I think I've been listening to you for almost 20 years, which started when you were on the late night slot on the old person's station. I used to listen to you at about 1 or 2 a.m. when I was driving home. I was a computer operator.
Yeah, when I first got to KMOX, Jim White, well, obviously was still there, so I was actually holding down that highly coveted 2 to 5 in the morning slot. And you wonder who's up. Just say something ignorant, and you find out pretty quickly. And especially with the reach of that station, I mean, they were calling from literally all over the world. And it was only probably 3-4 months before Jim retired, and he was referring to me as the heir apparent, although I was hearing nothing from management at the station, which I thought, well, you're leaving. This really isn't even your call. Right. But it worked out that way, and it made for a much smoother transition. You know, when a man who held down the slot for 30 years prior to me, you know, put the crown on my head, it kind of gave the listeners a nod of approval and a little cred going in. So that helped. Absolutely.
And congratulations on remaining relevant in an ever-changing radio market. How have you done it?
I have absolutely no idea, but I wake up every morning, and I really did had this conscious internal conversation not 2 days ago where I just think that somebody's going to call me or walk in the door during a commercial break and say, you know, we've made a horrible mistake. This program was supposed to go to Mr. Fowler and stay, you know, and I have to go do something else for a living. I still just giggle that I get to do this every day, and it's been 35 years.
Right, and you're good at it. I tell you what, your dad, Jack, was in the business and actually discouraged you from doing the same. What made you want to continue?
Well, that was it right there. You know, it was the, you know, go do whatever you want, but let me tell you, my experience, radio's dead, and there's no future in it. And, I mean, I was at Broadcast Center 2 weeks later.
Right. You have a knack for humor. When did you realize, I think I might be doing something right here?
When everybody knew or I knew, because there were lots of times on the way to the principal's office, and I thought, boy, you know, that impression of Father Blumker was dead on. I don't know why they don't appreciate my talents. You know, and it's just dumb luck. If I've always saw a classroom as an audience.
Right.
I mean, it was always, how do I crack these people up? The academics got in the way, and yeah, that's grown to bite me in the butt a little bit as an adult, but I'm not pursuing a career as an insurance salesman because nobody says, hey, let's go with that funny guy to do our taxes.
Right. Yeah, and you know what? I have a couple thousand people that wander into my trap daily at the airport, and I have a whole lot of different bits and routines and everything else that they all seem to work. So I get it.
Well, certainly when I think humor, I think TSA.
Oh, well, here's the thing. A lot of people come in and they're really, really uptight. And when they see a goofball like me, you know, telling them, hey, listen, empty your pockets or we're going to pat you down and you don't get to pick who does it, they kind of smile at 4 a.m. So let me turn this around for a second just because I do that. So what do the powers that be think of, you know, exuding a sense of humor in your line of work? I have a manager who loves it. She likes the fact that I can loosen them up rather than beat them down. And you know, as soon as you start yelling at somebody, they tune you out, like teenagers, right?
Right.
On the occasion that we have one or two people in the whole checkpoint, and this is about 9 o'clock, it's dead, I will go into a drill sergeant and say, passengers, listen up, slide your stuff down the table. And of course, the two people in there, they crack up because there's nobody there. So, but yeah, our manager likes it, and you know, when you're in the people business, there's more than one way to skin a cat. So,
oh yeah,
you and Martin have a way of poking at fun at yourselves, and you just don't take yourselves too serious. And I think people already have enough seriousness in their lives; they want to be entertained.
You know, there have been a lot of things in my life growing up that have been difficult, with my parents divorcing early, my mother dying when I was 13, my dad passing away when I was 21. And I'm not trying to paint a dire picture, but I adapted to all of that and a lot of moving around and things with humor and making new friends and being in new environments just with humor. And that was how I dealt with everything. And I still do, and sometimes it backfires, because when you try to tell somebody something serious, they think it's a punchline. But it's just how I'm wired. It's not really anything that I think about.
Right. Hey, guys, if you're just joining us, you're listening to The Rick Fowler Show on RiotRadioRocks.com. We've got John Carney of the Big 550. He is their noon to 3 p.m. Guy. He's on our show today. Now, your first job, John, was playing country music. Tell the truth, you hated it, right?
Yeah, and I've done it twice now. The first time was in Monte Vista, Colorado, which was a thriving metropolis at the southern corner of that state. And years later, I went down to the lake and did it in Eldon, Missouri, and at the management's bequest for several months, I went on the air as Eldon John. So we all have our own little personal hell to go through from time to time.
And how did you get through it? Were you on medication, suicide watch? How did you do it, pal?
I was single, and some friends of mine opened up a bar on the Strip at Osage Beach, and I wrote their commercials, and I voiced and produced their commercials, and in exchange for that, I had a bar tab for the entire summer.
Wow!
So that's how I did that.
And when you left there, your liver thanked you, right?
Yeah, maybe a Raleigh Hills gift certificate would have been nice to trade for too.
Right. You know
what? Does it even exist?
I don't know. It's impressive the amount of people that you have interviewed, but even more so is that you still have all of them, or a lot of them. Just this week with the passing of Gene Wilder, you were able to look back on an interview from, I think, 2005 or 6. How many do you think you have squirreled away?
I don't know. I have a couple of computer crashes and a couple of moron producers throwing stuff away because they were cassette tapes and they didn't even realize what they were, let alone what was on them. Right. I've lost some, but I haven't counted, but I would guess the library is somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 to 5,000 interviews.
Wow. That is
it's 3 to 5 conversations a day, 5 days a week. I don't save everything, like the guy, that is, sending out poop to your ex-girlfriend. You could send beetle dung to your old boss or whatever. Right. Some of those interviews I didn't save, but many I did.
Sure. I remember talking to Smash one time outside the Rams game one day, and I said, "Hey, Smash, you remember the time in the late 80s and you had Duffy Strode, the little preacher boy, on?" And Smash, "Oh, yeah, my man, he was good, wasn't he?" I said, "What are the chances of finding those?" And he just, "Oh, man, they're at a Foot Locker somewhere, man." So he wasn't. That's my Smash. He wasn't nearly as archived as you.
Well, I'm getting there too. I mean, my wife would argue with you on that. I mean, I still have boxes and boxes of reel-to-reel tapes, and those of you listening that have never been in the industry may not even know what that is, but it's about as archaic as it gets. And what happens is, with the passage of time, because those tapes are recorded now, I'm getting a little technical, is they arrange little tiny minute fragments of metal. With time, that stuff just flakes off and those things become useless. So a battle against time. I've got most of it off digital, but still plenty of cassettes and CDs that I want to put in my computer.
Probably a whole lot like the VCR tapes that we recorded in the early 80s or mid-80s.
Right. And, somebody will pass away or there'll be a relatable story. I'm like, I know I talked to them, and I go to get the interview and I can't find it. Right. And then it was like, well, that was either one of those ones on the hard drive that went away. And I know there's some that I won't get again, like Mel Torme was one, and there were a few others that people that I talked to that I went to go find those interviews, and they just don't exist anymore.
Who's the interview that you've missed out on that you would love to have one day?
Johnny Carson was a big one. Yeah. That's obviously not going to happen unless I find a really good spiritual medium
right.
to come in and do it. Boy, top my bucket list was John Cleese, and about 6 months ago I talked to him. Right. For Monty Python. Mm-hmm. So he's off the list. Who else is on the... I think someone like Brad Pitt would be an interesting story, or George Clooney. From that world, I've talked to Led Zeppelin. I've never talked to a Beatle. Paul McCartney, I think, or Ringo would be wonderful. But I've been pretty blessed, not been around as long as I have, talking to most of the people that I hold up.
No kidding. Hey, guys, if you just joined us, you're listening to John Carney, who is on the Rick Fowler Show, listening at RiotRadioRocks.com. John is on the Big 550 from noon to 3 p.m. each day. You should tune in and check him out. John, let's say they have a radio equal to football's Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, and you get the gold jacket and somebody has to give a speech to introduce you. Who would it be?
Who inducts me into the Radio Hall of Fame?
Yes.
Boy, I don't know. My father went in about 10 years ago to the Radio Hall of Fame, which actually is in Chicago. And Bob Costas did it for him, and I accepted the award because obviously Dad has passed on. And Costas attributed a lot of his career to my dad in planting the seed to branch out above and beyond play-by-play and sports. I would like to hold somebody up and say, yeah, it was my influence that made them go on to do terrific things. There's probably a dozen people on the radio in St. Louis right now who sometime between 1990 and 1994, when I was teaching broadcasting, were students of mine. I think one of those would mean a lot to me, whether it was Courtney Landrum or Paul Cook from Y98.
You know, Brett Favre just had his wife give his.
You know, I was thinking about asking Brett's wife also.
Yeah, she might be available. So
you know, the wife would be a good call, too.
Well, keep you out of the doghouse, right?
One of them, anyway.
Right. If your three best pieces of work were enshrined in the hall with you, what interviews would you include?
You know, you mentioned the Gene Wilder interview, and I really liked that one. I really liked another one I did with Steve Martin a couple years ago. And not so much because of what they had to say, but Steve is really reserved and doesn't do a lot of interviews and was very one-word answery going in, and I really had to chip away at him to get him to loosen up and earn his trust, and I think I did, and I kind of hold that up as a good one. And when a guest says something like, you know, no one's ever asked me that,
right,
and it's somebody who's been interviewed 5 million times, that makes me feel terrific. Those kinds of situations. Favorite broadcast moment in general, I don't possess, sadly. And it was the day after September 11th, 2001. For some reason, and I'm at KMOX, and they called me into the office, and they called Jack Buck into the office, and management says to us, we want you two to host Afternoon Drive.
Wow.
I don't know if somebody was on vacation or what, and Jack had been on my show a number of times. And we were close, and I hold him up as a mentor as much, if not more, than anyone else, even though I don't do anything with sports. But the two of us killed 3 or 4 hours on the air, and I don't remember what we talked about, and we looked at each other like, what are we doing? Why do they want us to do this? And it just was terrific, and I can't tell you why, and I wish to God I had a copy, and I don't.
Well, you know, you always hear of people saying, well, your evening news is delivered by so-and-so who you trust and you put faith in, blah, blah, blah. Of course, they're reading exactly what their teleprompter tells them to, but these people think that they know them. And so I would have to think it wasn't too much different than that. You guys are on the air and talk to the people while they're driving around. They're working each day. And so probably a whole lot of the same, huh?
Yeah. And I don't know if this would be my favorite work, but certainly one of the most surreal experiences involves Jack Buck, too. And I was kind of the Grim Reaper of radio at one point when Nan Wyatt's death was announced on my show. Carnahan's plane went down during my show. Joe Buck called to say Dad had died during my show. And that last one, after Joe and I spent some time on the air, the calls started to come in about Jack Buck. So we just let it go. Well, they kept me on the air. I was on the air maybe 7 hours. And the TV station downstairs, Channel 4 came up and set up a camera pointing at me in the studio, and then the guy left. So I didn't know if he was getting B-roll because they were doing something about Jack Buck. So fast forward 2-3 hours, I'm taking more calls. We're talking Jack Buck. We've gone commercial free at this point, so no pee break for me. I grabbed the TV remote, flip the channel, and there's me flipping the channel on the TV.
You're like, oh, wow.
And I think, oh, well, that's probably the house feed that we're getting from this camera. I flipped to 2. I flipped to 4. I flipped to 5. I flipped to 11. Every single channel is me flipping the channels. I have been broadcast on every station all night long, and nobody told me. So I'm thinking, did I pick my nose? Yeah. Did I get up and scratch my butt? It was, it was beyond bizarre.
And what a day to wear the sweatpants, coffee all over the shirt, and lasagna on your face and every other thing.
Yeah, probably had all that going.
Tell you what, we're going to take just a quick break. Let me stop you there, and we're going to run some commercials. We'll be right back today. Okay, we're going to get back to our interview with John Carney. Hopefully he has not hung up on us. What is your advice for young people that want to get into the business? To not run?
You know what? You follow your heart. Know that you're not, if you need plaudits, if you need pats on the back, if you need to eat, this is probably not the thing for you. But if you can hang in there and just get by on doing what you love and know that you might have to do a little something else and sacrifice things in your other life, like, I don't know, clothes and food and gas, then go for it. I mean, I see my friends, I've always felt so bad for the people around me that clock in and clock out, and their job is just that. It's a job. I can't wait to get here and do this. And I'm always thinking about, how do I turn this into a story for the show? Right. You know, it's just part of my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Well, and you know, there's funny stuff that happens all over. You just have to be able to look for it. Like, you know, stand-up comedians, they spot it and have an eye for it. You wouldn't believe, in watching a couple thousand people a day, some of what I see, and it's all out there. So tell me a little bit about the Carney's Kids Foundation that you head up.
Oh, thank you, Rick. You know, I started it about 10 years ago, and anyone in our business knows that we get the calls daily. Can you MC this? Will you host this golf tournament? Will you come speak to our Red Hat ladies? Will you come? You know, it doesn't stop. And I had never said no, and I would go do all these speaking engagements and host all these auctions and do all of this. And I didn't mind doing it because it was a small price to pay to get to do what I loved. But I didn't see the difference I was making. A piece of lucite would show up a week later saying, hey, thanks, you helped us raise $150,000 for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or Matthew's Dickey Boys Club, or Crisis Nursery. And I wanted to do more. Just standing in front of a mic and being a smart aleck at a dinner or a radio show didn't seem like I was making any grand sacrifice or doing anything more than I was doing anyway. So I did some volunteer work for an organization that helped out kids who had lost siblings or a parent at a young age, because I had experienced that. And ironically, when I got a DUI about 9 years ago, they said, you know what? We really aren't comfortable maintaining this relationship. So I got kicked out for my volunteer work, and a woman that was a friend of mine who was also on the board, she said, let's start our own organization. So we started Carney's Kids with the mission being helping children-based organizations, because I got a microphone every day.
Right.
There's organizations people don't know about. Least I can do is talk about them. I'll host their things, but I'll talk about them on the radio and educate people about what's going on. So we singled out about 6 organizations, and the more I got involved with them, the more needs I realized that they had. So it grew from talking about them to rolling up the sleeves and getting involved with them and figuring out how to raise money for them, putting out a series of 2 cookbooks, having a big charity event in February, and not just handing them a check and saying, here, but then turning around and personally serving the families that work with these charities. And it's been the most rewarding thing shy of this interview in my entire life.
Wow, what a thing. Before we wrap it up, guys, you're listening to the Rick Fowler Show. We have John Carney, who is the noon to 3 guy on 550 AM. You're listening on RiotRadioRocks.com. I always wrap up each interview, John, with 3 questions, and they're all just about the same.
Oh my God, what are you, Mike Wallace? I'm exhausted.
I told you 15 or 20. You've taken it to 30, pal. What music do you listen to, or what shows do you listen to? What does John Carney like?
What shows do I listen to?
Yeah, do you have any radio shows that you like?
Oh, no, I just listen to me.
Let me guess.
No, I leave usually wherever I'm working, I leave that station on all the time. I don't listen to music a whole lot in the car, yet I'm a musician, and music's always been really important. But I usually listen to talk radio just to hear what's going on, what they're doing, making sure I'm not having on the same guest that McGraw talked to earlier that morning, or what is the hot topic, what are the people calling in about. Just staying plugged in, that helps me.
Staying current. Talking about the music, you told a story on air one time that you were actually on stage with Chuck Berry, and after you told it, I don't know, short on sleep or whatever, I laughed for hours. He said he was on stage, you're playing guitar, you look over, and Chuck makes eye contact, and he nods to you and walks over, and you're expecting him to tell you, leave the building or get off the stage, and he just walks over and just nods at you of approval. Do you remember telling me?
You really were lacking sleep, because that was Ike Turner.
Was it Ike? Okay. All right.
I did meet Chuck Berry in his dressing room at the pageant, and a very intimidating man.
The Ike story, though, that was probably about 2005 or 7 that you told it, and hilarious. Get off the stage, Tita, bitch.
Yeah, I was sure. I mean, here I am. I'm playing bongos and congas, and I'm next to Johnny Johnson, and little Milton's on stage, and just some Rita Mae Brown, whatever her name. I mean, I'm on stage with these blues legends at the pageant, and Ike Turner, and Ike's looking at me, and he's got such a gaze. I really think he's going to come over and hit me and give me a T-net on the side of the head or something. But too soon. And he just looks at me, walks all the way over, never breaking the gaze, and says, yeah.
That is hilarious. Get off.
That's the only time I think I peed on stage.
Get off the stage, white boy. That's funny.
That's what I expected.
Oh. Wow. Last meal on death row, what would it be? And don't say one of your sponsors.
Well, I'd like to think I got better attorneys than that.
Yeah. What would your last meal be? Your go-to?
Probably Peking duck, because in any Chinese restaurant it always says please allow 30 minutes. So there's a little extra time in the preparation.
Good answer. The one person you'd like to meet or see again, living or dead?
See again, meaning I met them once already?
Yeah, or somebody you've never met. Either or. I get Michael Jackson a lot to this question. Elvis.
I would like to meet David Letterman.
Yeah. Have you seen him lately? Well, he looks a whole lot different.
He looks like the Unabomber.
Yeah. Kaczynski. Yeah.
But I think he would be fun to spend some time with.
Yeah. And, he was on the edge doing that college kid humor way back, well before anybody. And
oh, yeah.
He was funny. Well, John, I sure thank you for joining us. You've been listening to John Carney. He is the noon to 3 guy on the Big 550 KTRS. We sure appreciate you having on Riot Radio. And the Rick
you
Fowler
calling
Show.
Me next week, too?
I will text you and tell you the airport story from the airport. How's that sound?
Hey, thanks so much.
Well, we appreciate having you on.
My pleasure.
Thanks, John. Bye. All right, that was John Carney of the Big 550 on RiotRadioRocks.com. And that's a wrap.
Do you feel blame? Are you mad? Do you feel like Woods about referendums? Get friends.
Want to play that? I'm getting the out of here.
This is your celebration. But it's much too late for goodbye. Yes, it's much too late for goodbye.
Come on, friend.
Listening to The Rick Fowler Show.
Riot Radio. You found it. Total variety, talk, and music. Streaming live and available on demand. Go to RiotRadioRocks.com for the show schedule and all the info where you can tune in.